I heard it one Saturday afternoon as the sun slanted through the maple tree outside and left small patches of light on the kitchen's wooden floor. His voice deep, lazy, a little hoarse, after a midday drink drifted from the study. She has no idea. She still thinks I really love her. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hands still holding the wet wiping cloth. One sentence, 4 seconds, and 19 years of marriage shattered in my mind like a glass falling onto a stone floor. Behind his voice was that of another woman, younger, softer, with a hint of arrogance. "Are you serious, David? She doesn't suspect anything." His light laugh broke out. "Suspect Evelyn always believes what makes her feel safe, and I know how to give her that." I stepped back. My heart didn't beat fast nor chaotically. It beat steadily, a cold, even rhythm. There was no jealousy, only clarity, as if my eyes had finally been opened. For 19 years, I'd played the part of the composed wife, the woman who was always stable, always trusting, always giving. And this was my reward, an arrogant confession in the very house I paid for. I wiped my hands on my apron, took off my wedding ring, and placed it next to the sink. No tears, no sighs, only the sound of the dishwasher roaring. The only thing in this kitchen still loyal to me. I went to the backyard where the white roses were still blooming, tiny blossoms steady as if nothing was wrong with the world. I picked one, put it in a chipped glass vase on the wooden table. If someone had asked me then, "How do you feel?" I'd have said like standing in the middle of a storm without a single hair moving. About 15 minutes later, I heard the loud slam of the door and the car engine starting. He was going somewhere, maybe to meet her, maybe just to figure out how to write the next lie. I didn't care. Actually, I wasn't strong enough to care yet. I sat down looking at the expense sheet I'd managed for years. The numbers, income invoices, mortgage payments, our daughter's tuition were all lined up. But now I saw something else. Money transfer trails, a hastily recorded business expense, a few receipts from a Portland hotel I had never been to. I didn't need a confession anymore. All the evidence was right in front of me and the numbers I had meticulously entered every month. That night when he came home, I was still sitting at the dining table, bathed in the pale yellow light. "You're still up?" he asked, his voice tired but calm, as if he had nothing to hide. I looked at him, giving a smile that even I found foreign. "Are you tired?" "Just the usual. The project has been demanding." I nodded. "I think we should talk." He paused slightly. "About what?" "About the business expenses at the Riverway Hotel." For the first time in years, I saw his true look, defensive, then dismissive, then challenging. "Were you snooping?" "No, I was just managing the budget, like I've done for 19 years. No one screamed, no plates flew, no tears fell, only a silence as thick as smoke. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "What do you want, Evelyn?" I replied. "The truth." He gave a dry laugh. "The truth doesn't pay the bills, you know that." That sentence, colder than the affair itself. Because it didn't just betray my heart, it insulted my intelligence. I stood up and poured water. "Then let me pay the rest, and you can keep your share." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "We'll end things clean. You have her, I have my dignity." I didn't yell. I didn't tremble. I only knew one thing: every door begins to close with silence. The next day, he woke up late. I woke up earlier than ever. In the faint light, I made coffee-toasted bread and packed my suitcase. Not to leave, but to prepare. Prepare for a fight he would never believe I was brave enough to start. I once believed everything in a marriage could be healed with patience. But some cracks don't need patching. They need to be stared at. When he left for work, I opened the small safe under the kitchen cabinet. Inside, I kept copies of all the financial documents, joint accounts, savings books, stocks, and the house deed. I knew he had once said, "Don't worry, everything is in both our names." Wrong. The papers clearly showed most of the investment assets, cars, and retirement funds were solely in his name. I sat there for hours reading every line. Every word was a small incision. He had carefully cut me out of his life long before I realized I was betrayed. At noon, I called Linda, my old college friend, now a financial lawyer in Seattle. "I need to ask you a few things," I said. Her voice on the other end was surprised, then lowered. "About David." I stayed silent. "Yeah, I get it. Tell me." I spoke in a rush about him, the accounts, the suspicious transfers, and the girl from yesterday's phone call. Linda listened without interruption. When I stopped, she said, "Evelyn, you're not a victim. You're the one who holds the data. You just need to use it right." That sentence, like a match lighting a slow fuse. I knew from that moment I wouldn't sit still anymore. That afternoon, when he came home, I cooked dinner as usual. The table was fully set: roast salad, mashed potatoes, a glass of red wine. He was surprised. "Is it a special occasion?" "It is still," I replied, "an anniversary for the day I started living truthfully." He laughed, thinking I was joking. "You're being odd." I served him the largest portion of meat. "Eat up. You'll need your strength for what's coming." Throughout the meal, I talked about small things: the rose garden, the roof that needed fixing, our daughter's upcoming driving test. As dinner neared its end, I placed a brown envelope in front of him. "This is a copy of all the assets solely in your name." I took it from the safe. He froze. "Are you insane?" "No, I'm more awake than ever." He snatched the envelope, pulling out the papers. His eyes shifted color: anger, fear, then suspicion. "What do you want, Mom?" "Freedom and fairness." He tilted his head. "Are you going for divorce?" "No," he sneered. "Then what is it?" "It's about no longer being lied to and still having to smile." That night, while he slept, I went out onto the porch looking down at the street. Summer in Oregon wasn't intensely hot, just slightly humid with a distant smell of sea salt. The streetlights reflected on the wet sidewalk, creating streaks of light like incisions. I thought about the women who had confided in me, those who left with nothing simply because they weren't prepared. I wouldn't be like that. I would prepare. Tomorrow I'd open a separate account. Next week I'd meet with the lawyer, and next month, if necessary, I would leave with my dignity intact. But first I would reclaim myself. The morning after, the Oregon sky was shrouded in ash-gray fog. I made coffee, the bitter smell spreading through the kitchen, a scent that reminded me I was still alive. David came out, tie crooked, his shirt smelling of fabric softener. I recognized the scent wasn't the one I used. "Leaving so early?" I asked. "Yeah, meeting with a new client. Portland." "What's her name?" The question slipped out as lightly as a breath, yet it cut the air as sharply as a knife. He froze, blinked, then forced a smile. What are you talking about? What's her name? David, the one who smells of lavender fabric softener and has a habit of laughing over the phone. He gripped his briefcase, his chin lowered. You're being overly suspicious, Evelyn. I put down the coffee cup. No. Suspicion is when you imagine things. I heard it. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. Don't lie anymore. I never had proof, and maybe that's why you thought you could continue. But yesterday I heard everything, even her laughter. The air grew thick. He took a deep breath and let out a long sigh. All right, he said softly. Maybe I was wrong. But you're not perfect either, Evelyn. You're cold. You only care about work. You suffocate me. And that's why you slept with her, I cut in. Don't talk like I'm a monster. No, you're not a monster, David. Monsters know fear. You don't. He fell silent. His eyes drifted elsewhere. I saw it in that moment. There was nothing left to save. After he left, I opened my laptop. On the desk was a small notebook, the ledger, where I had recorded every transaction for 10 years. I never forgot a number, and today they would become my weapon. I opened the online bank account, a series of small regular withdrawals, all going to the same card. Name, Marissa Cole. Company email @draytonconsulting.com. I turned on my phone, opened LinkedIn. In under 2 minutes, I found her blonde, 32, a PR specialist at his company. Her profile picture, a half smile, the confident look of someone who believes they're getting what they want. I stared at that face for a long time, then saved the picture to a separate folder. I named the folder The Truth. That afternoon, I went to the bank. The teller named Trina, the young woman who'd helped me open my daughter's savings account, smiled. I'd like to open a new account. I said, my voice steady. Would you like to add a co-owner? No, just me. As she printed the papers, I looked out the glass window. It was raining again, the drops scratching the pane. I thought of how David always said, I'll take care of everything. No, now I would take care of myself. I signed the papers 3 times. Each time my hand was steadier. That evening, I ate dinner alone. My daughter, Hannah, 16, was at summer camp. She sent a quick text, Mom, everything okay? I replied, It is, sweetie, just a little tired. She sent a heart emoji. I smiled, then turned off the phone. David didn't come home. No text, no call. I went upstairs, pulled open the drawer, and took out a small walnut box. Inside were memorabilia, wedding photos, the rings a handwritten note from him. I promise to always protect you. I put everything into a Ziploc bag, then placed it in the freezer. Memories, I thought, also need to be frozen to keep them from rotting. The next morning, I drove to his company. I didn't go in. I just parked across the street. From inside the car, I watched him, David, walk out with Marissa. They were laughing. She lightly touched his collar to adjust it, a touch as natural as if they'd done it 100 times. He opened the car door for her, then gently placed his hand on her back as she got in. That hand had once rested on my shoulder, had trembled when I gave birth, had clasped mine at his mother's funeral. Now it rested on someone else, light as the wind carelessly erasing me. I sat still, my heart no longer aching. Perhaps the pain had transformed into something else, willpower. 3 days later, I met Linda again. We sat in a small cafe near the docks. Outside, a light rain was falling. I placed the file folder in front of her. I want to file for a separation of assets. Not divorce yet, but a clear demarcation. Linda looked at me. Does he know? Not yet, and I want to keep it that way. Do you have proof of the affair? Yes, at least enough to keep him from denying it. She nodded. I'll help. But Evelyn, you need to prepare for the counterattack. I smiled. I know, but this time I'm not afraid. That night he came home. A strange perfume clung to his shirt. I said nothing, just handed him a white envelope. What is this? Legal documents. He tore it open, read a few lines, and his face changed color. What game are you playing? Not a game, a contract. We're separating assets. I won't touch your money, and you won't touch mine. My share, he burst out laughing, his voice bitter. Everything you have is because of me. Is that right? I tilted my head. Then why is my name on the first mortgage payment? Why was the retirement account opened in 2006 with my mother's savings? Do you want me to turn over every receipt? He fell silent. For the first time, I saw him speechless. I stepped closer, looking straight into his eyes. You thought I was weak, but you forgot that I'm the one who built this house brick by brick. If you tear it down, I'll be the one sweeping up the ashes. He threw the envelope onto the table. You're going crazy. No, I said, my voice calmly cold. I just woke up from a 2-decade-long coma. The next day, I got serious. I hired an independent investigator Martha Jensen recommended by Linda. She was about 50 with streaked gray hair and eyes sharp as a knife. I need all evidence of the relationship between David Hemsworth and Marissa Cole, I said. You want photos, meeting schedules, transactions, everything. 3 days later, she called. You should meet me. We met in her car in a parking lot behind the shopping center. Martha placed a thick envelope on the seat. He didn't just betray you emotionally, Evelyn. What do you mean? He's been transferring funds from the company account into Marissa's private account. They're disguised as PR contracts, but it's essentially laundering bonus money. I opened the envelope. Inside were statements, photos, and an audio recording, David telling Marissa, Don't worry, I'll use the company's sub-account. She will never find out. Me, the one he promised to protect. I closed my eyes. My heart pounded, but not from pain. It was the adrenaline of someone about to win. That evening, I cleaned out the entire kitchen. I took down the wedding photos, smashed the glass frames, but didn't cry. I just needed to make the house neutral, no longer ours, only mine. When David walked in, he saw me packing things. Are you leaving that? No, I replied, just returning what doesn't belong to me. I handed him a stack of photos, some old souvenirs, and a printout of him and Marissa. His face went white. Are you stalking me? No, I'm just recording facts like an accountant does. He snatched the photo, throwing it to the floor. What do you want, Evelyn? I want you to understand what it feels like to lose control. You'll regret this. No, you will. I pulled the remaining envelope from my pocket, the transfer statements. If you dare to threaten me one more time, I'll send this entire package straight to the company board and the IRS. Believe me, David, a financial scandal kills a career faster than a divorce. He stepped back. For the first time, I saw him afraid. a real, unconcealed fear. I advanced my voice low and steady. You took my money, my mother's money, my trust. Now it's my turn to take back the one thing you can't buy, my peace. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, a glass of wine in my hand, looking out the window. The rain was still falling, but this rain wasn't sad anymore. It felt like it was cleansing the filth clinging to the walls of the house. I remembered what Linda had said earlier. When a woman starts telling the truth, the whole world of men will tremble. I smiled. That's right. And David's world was about to tremble. Three days later, his company underwent an internal audit. Linda sent a text. Word is spreading. Stay silent. Don't react. I deleted the text, replying, only understood. That evening he came home, his face ash gray. What did you do? He growled. Nothing. Perhaps the truth simply surfaced. They're investigating me. Do you understand the consequences? I do. I sipped my wine, my eyes fixed on him. But perhaps now you should understand the consequences of underestimating someone who once trusted you. He slammed his hand on the table, then stepped closer. You've ruined everything. No, David. I stood up, meeting his gaze. I'm just cleaning up. What's dirty must be thrown away. He clenched his jaw, his eyes red. You can't live without me. I gave a small laugh. You're wrong. I never lived for you. I just forgot that I could live alone. He left, slamming the door so hard the wall shook. The sound of his car speeding down the driveway sounded like the closing of a chapter. When the house was silent, I walked out to the yard. The scent of night roses mixed with the smell of damp earth. I took a deep breath, feeling a lightness in my chest for the first time in years. I took out my phone, opened a note, and typed, starting tomorrow, I'll begin again. A new account, a new name if necessary, but no longer anyone's wife. I saved it, locked the screen, and looked up at the sky. A lightning bolt tore through the clouds, the flash reflecting on the window pane. My face in it no longer trembled. Three weeks later, the lawyer sent an update. The internal investigation had indeed found a series of fraudulent transactions. Marissa was suspended. David was asked to take a leave of absence. Linda texted, for now, don't let anyone see you've won. Just be silent. That's the greatest power. I closed my phone, chuckling softly. Silence, which used to be my chains, had become my weapon. I wrote in my journal, he taught me how to hide. Now I'm teaching him how to pay the price. A week later, I received a text from an unknown number. Are you satisfied you've ruined me? I didn't reply. Instead, I sent back a photo, the newly repainted kitchen, bright, tidy, and peaceful. The caption, no, I just cleaned up what was dirty. That evening, I sat on the porch, listening to the wind howl through the chimney. I thought about my daughter. Hannah didn't know the whole story yet. I didn't want her to grow up with hatred. But I knew one day when she asked, Mom, why did you leave Dad? I would answer truthfully, because I chose self-respect over fake love. And maybe that would be the day I found true freedom. 3 weeks after the internal audit, I thought things had calmed down. David had vanished from the house, the office, even the city. as if he'd dissolved into thin air. Linda told me to stay calm, that men like him, when cornered, will coil before they strike. I believed her until Monday morning, when an envelope arrived from the bank. Savings account number 492677, frozen by temporary order of the Multnomah County Court. I read it over and over. Claimant's name David Hemsworth, reason suspicion of financial fraud and misappropriation of company assets. I sat down, my head swimming. The whole kitchen suddenly shrunk, stifling like a box. I called Linda. He's playing hardball, her voice was grave. He's blaming the entire money laundering scheme on you. He has the fake PR contract with Marissa, the one with your electronic signature. I never signed it. He might have forged the signature, but Evelyn, this is serious. If you don't respond correctly, you could actually be prosecuted. I let out a laugh, a short, choked laugh. So he wants me to lose everything, my dignity, my money, my freedom. More than that, Linda said quietly, he wants your sanity. That evening I received a text from an unknown number. You think you're smart? You're just a pawn. Meet me tomorrow night. If not, I'll make sure you have no opportunity to speak to the court. I reread it many times, my heart slowly turning cold. The writing style was exactly David's, precise, ruthless. I sat in the dark for hours. The clock ticking on the wall sounded like footsteps. I remembered Linda's words, when a manipulator goes silent, that's when he's setting up the final blow. The next morning I went to see Martha, the investigator who'd helped me before. I need to know where he is, I said. She looked at me, then opened her laptop. He rented a room at the Riverway Hotel with that girl. Marissa, she nodded. I don't want to involve the police yet. I just want evidence, everything, Martha sighed. Evelyn, men like David, when they feel they've lost control, they'll do anything. You have to be extremely careful. Don't worry, I said, my voice steady. I have nothing left to lose. That night I drove to the Riverway. It was pouring rain. The wind whipped across the surface of the Willamette River. I parked the car in a hidden corner, the headlights reflecting on the ink-black water. Room 502. A pale yellow light leaked out from under the door. I heard laughter, loud, harsh, drunken. His voice. She thinks she won. You know, Evelyn always thinks she's better than everyone. But she's going to learn that everything has a price. She asked, and if she fights back? He laughed softly. Then I have something that will silence her lawyer, the video from the office. That night he accidentally left the camera on. Everything blurred before me. I no longer knew if I was shaking from the cold or from fear. I backed away, nearly tripping over a puddle, and in that moment he opened the door and stepped out. His eyes scanned the hallway, then stopped at me. Evelyn. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me freeze. He advanced. Coming to eavesdrop. You can't live without me, can you? You're committing a crime. And you're making a mistake, the mistake of believing I still have humanity. I turned to walk away. He grabbed my wrist, pulling hard. Let go, David. He slammed me against the wall, his breath reeking of alcohol. I used to love you, Evelyn, but you turned love into calculation. You forced me to betray you. I stared straight at him. You betrayed me because you're weak, not because I'm strong. Marissa appeared wearing a robe, afraid. David let her go. He turned and slapped her. The sound echoed loudly. I screamed, "Enough!" then pushed him away, running toward the stairs. His voice roared after me, "You'll pay Evelyn!" I came home soaking wet. Inside, everything was ransacked, cabinets open, papers torn up. The back door lock was pried open. I understood he had been here earlier. On the kitchen table was a white envelope. Inside was a photo of me taken secretly through the window. A note was attached. "If you make me lose any more, I will make you disappear." I clenched the paper. For the first time in years, I felt true fear. Not the fear of loss, but the fear of disappearing without anyone knowing I ever existed. The next 3 days were hell. The bank confirmed David had used the temporary joint account access to withdraw $80,000 for marital expenses. The police couldn't arrest him yet due to lack of direct physical threat evidence. Linda was weary. "You have to leave for a while. He's stalking you." "Go where?" "There's a cottage on the coast in Astoria. A friend of mine left it for me. Stay there for a few weeks. I'll handle things here." I nodded. That night I packed. While folding clothes, I saw an old photo, David and me, newly married, standing by the ocean, smiling radiantly. I didn't know why I still kept it. Maybe a part of me still wanted to believe the people in the photo were once real. The road to Astoria was long and winding through the hills. I drove alone, the radio playing softly. A female singer sang, "We built this love like a house of cards." I laughed, then cried, unable to tell the boundary between the two emotions. The cottage was right by the beach, small, white painted with a creaky wooden porch. I locked the door, turned on the light. The smell of sea salt mixed with dampness. I sat down in a chair, opened my laptop. No network signal. Good. At least he couldn't find me right away. My first night in Astoria, I had a dream. In the dream, David stood in the middle of a black ocean holding out the wedding ring. "Give it back, Evelyn. You want everything, don't you?" I walked toward him, picked up the ring, and the seawater turned to blood. I woke up with a start, covered in cold sweat. Outside, the wind howled the window panes, rattling. I heard a sound very faint at the door. A piece of paper was slipped underneath. "I know where you are." I ran out onto the porch, only seeing the shadow of a car driving away. The next morning, Linda called. "He just sold his company's shares. The entire amount has been transferred to an offshore fund. Evelyn, we can trace it, but it will take time. You have to stay calm." "Calm?" I laughed, choking on the sound. "Do you know what he just sent me?" "What?" "A photo of me sleeping inside this house." Silence on the other end. "Are you sure?" "I don't know what I'm sure of anymore, Linda." "I just know he's out there, and he wants me to lose my mind." That afternoon, I opened all the windows, letting the light flood in. I made coffee, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror, gaunt, swollen eyes, but still a spark of fire. I remembered my mother's words. "When men want to kill your spirit, they make you doubt yourself." No, I won't let him kill me with doubt. I took the satellite phone Linda had given me and sent a brief message to Martha. "I need all of David's financial records, and if you can trace the offshore transfer." 2 days later, Martha sent back a compressed file. Careful. He's laundering $3.2 million through a ghost fund in Belize. Part of it might be company money, the rest funds withdrawn from your retirement account. I stared at the number, my hands shaking. I used to think David was just greedy. Now I understood he was addicted to power. That evening I went to the beach. Waves crashed against the cold rocks. I thought about everything, about Hannah, about the house, about the youth I had buried in his fake tenderness. I asked myself, if I called the police, if he was truly caught, would I feel lighter or just emptier? I picked up a pebble and threw it into the water. The waves rolled up, white foam dissolving. I spoke softly, as if to myself. He took everything. Now he's going to watch me take it back, one thing at a time. Later that night, the phone rang. Hannah's voice shaking. "Mom, Dad called me. He said you're sick and need help. Is it true?" I froze. "No, my love. Don't believe him. Where are you?" "I'm at my aunt's house. Dad said he'd come pick me up tomorrow." "No, listen to me. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." The phone went dead. I sank to the floor, my heart squeezed tight. He wasn't aiming at me anymore. He was aiming at my daughter. I dialed Linda, my voice cracking. "He's coming for Hannah." "Calm down. I'll call the police. Stay on the line." 2 hours later, she called back. "The girl is safe. The police got there in time. David fled, but Evelyn—" He left a note. "What is it?" "You can't hide from me, because I'm in your blood." I dropped my head onto the table. For the first time, I wept uncontrollably, not out of fear, out of despair. He was no longer a human being. He was a nightmare I created with my love. Three days later, Linda brought news David was arrested at the California border. He was planning to board a private jet to Belize. The police confiscated all financial documents, but one thing sent a chill down my spine. In his suitcase were photos of me, photos of Hannah, and a handgun. I remained silent, staring at the wall. Linda said he wasn't planning to run. He was planning to come back. That evening I sat alone in the seaside house, the wind whistling through the cracks in the door, the sound of the waves like fragmented prayers. I opened my laptop and wrote a letter to Hannah. "If one day I don't come back, know that I tried to live right, not to beat your father, but to not lose myself." I saved it, closed the lid. Outside headlights flashed on the window. A black car had stopped outside the gate. My heart skipped a beat. I walked over, pulled the curtain aside. No one was in the car, only an envelope placed on the doorstep. I opened it. "Time for one last talk." "I don't need the money. I just need the truth," signed David. Inside was the wedding ring, the one I had left by the kitchen sink. I stood still for a long time. Every sound vanished. No waves, no wind, only me and the ring glittering like an unextinguished coal. I knew he would find me, and if I kept running, he would never stop. There was only one way to end it: confrontation. I called Linda, my voice strangely calm. "Linda, if anything happens, don't call the police right away. I need to see him one last time. I need to understand why." "Evelyn, don't be foolish. You've already won." "No, I haven't. I've only survived. I hung up, picked up the ring, and put it in my pocket. Outside, the rain began to fall. I opened the door and stepped into the darkness. When I arrived at the riverway, the sea wind swirled like a scream. Room 502 was still lit. I walked in. He was standing there, thinner, his face gaunt, but his eyes still blazing. "What do you want, David?" "I want the truth." "About what?" "About us. About why you made all of this collapse." "I made it collapse," I laughed. "You betrayed, you stole, you tried to destroy me, and now you say I made it collapse." He snarled. "If you hadn't been so controlling, I wouldn't have had to lie. You turned me into the villain so you could feel superior." I stepped closer. "No, David, you chose your own path. I just stopped walking with you." He breathed heavily, then pulled a paper from his jacket pocket, divorce papers. "Sign it, and I'll drop the lawsuit. We'll both be free." I looked at the paper, then at him. "Free? You don't know what that word means." I took the pen and signed my name very slowly. When I put the pen down, he smiled. "I knew you would." But as he picked up the paper, the door burst open. 2 federal agents and Martha walked in. "David Hemsworth, you're under arrest for extortion and witness intimidation." He froze, then looked at me. "You called them—" "No, you called them yourself when you sent me the ring. There are security cameras at the post office, David. You walked right into your own trap." He gave a dry laugh, his eyes empty. "I once loved you, Evelyn," I replied, "and I once believed you. Now we're both equally foolish." As they led him away, I just stood there. The room was empty, only the signed divorce papers on the table, a dried blood stain on the carpet, and the sound of waves outside the window. I picked up the paper, folded it, and put it in my pocket. I thought, this is proof you once existed, and I once survived. I walked outside. The rain had stopped. The faint moon shone on the river. I threw the ring into the water. It disappeared without a sound. In that moment, I felt lighter than a breath. I walked into the morning like a tightrope walker, no longer trembling, only a cold map in my head. Every coordinate, every transaction, every name David thought was buried with his promises and lies. 3 weeks after everything collapsed, when people believed he was locked in a cell and every door had closed, I sat amidst the pieces of my life and heard a strange sound, not crying, but the whirring of a computer, a calculating chord. I had swallowed the bitterness, told myself I wouldn't let money define my worth anymore. But now, lifting each invoice, each transfer receipt, looking at the numbers stacked like chess pieces, I knew that erasing him couldn't be done with just a vow. To make the man who manipulated me gasp with fear, I had to understand how he breathed through the flow of money. I found Marcus, a former government hacker who sold his ideals for technical challenges. I spoke not as a former wife, but as a newly crowned CEO, cold as ice. "Give me the back door to Hemsworth Capital." He laughed the laugh of a man who knew he could be bought and said, "How much?" I paid double his asking price, and Marcus began peeling back the layers of numbers. In days, we found a critical oversight, a company registered in Delaware David used for cover, a legal name with one incorrect character in the share transfer documents, a small but fatal mistake. He thought the invisible sophistication of the American legal system would save him. He forgot that the fire of my resentment was hot enough to melt metal. I didn't rush in with violence. I rushed in with calculation. I restored my business identity like a tailor, mending torn cloth, every signature, every clause, every proxy statement. When I walked into the boardroom, the whispers stretched out like a drawn curtain. Everyone in the room looked at me like an old ghost returned to clean up. I didn't plead, I commanded. I called the accounting system demanding all reports from the last 3 years. They gave me heavy data files David prided himself on hiding. I plugged a USB stick into the projector and threw it onto the table. Inside was a portion of the evidence not to immediately indict, but to send a message I knew the loyal henchmen would hear and be afraid. I set new rules for the game. Every withdrawal over $50,000 required 2 independent signatures and an internal notification sent directly to the board. Every third-party contract had to pass an audit. They called me vindictive. I replied with a smile sharp as a honed knife. I'm just making sure your money doesn't flow out of my reach anymore. That was the first step, turning myself from victim into gatekeeper. I understood now David didn't need to be present to ruin someone. He let his system do the work, and that system was a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, contracts written in legal jargon, but full of deceit. Marcus gave me a line connecting to Blackshore Holdings, a dry name, behind a $14 million series of transfers that I knew exactly where they went. Belize, Panama, a money trail escaping the light. He had thought of everything but one thing, that the woman he left behind would not only weep, but would learn to play the same language as the powerful. I set a financial trap not to close the door entirely, but to control how the money could move. I made every attempt by someone in the system to withdraw a large sum, trigger a red phone call to the FBI, not because I loved the law, but because I knew they feared public exposure more than jail. I didn't want to become the monster I once hated. I wanted to become an instrument of fear, a shadow that forced those who once trifled with others' lives to now look at the iceberg and see themselves beneath it. Linda, the only friend left standing by me without flinching, looked at me as if she saw a person who had transformed into the very thing she despised. She said, "Evelyn, you're crossing a line." And I replied, "I'm not crossing a line, Linda. I'm rewriting the border." Every decision was a deeper step into the dark. I felt the change in my cells. Then I reached out to Marissa Cole, the face behind Blackshore's sharp hair pulled back, lips stained red like an exclamation mark on her contracts. When she walked into the office, I found I didn't want to scream. I wanted to negotiate on the foundation of the terror she used to sow. I showed her what I knew: accounts, transactions, fake passport photos. "You have 2 choices," I said. "Help me flush David out of his hole or burn with him." Marissa gave a slight smile, as if evaluating prey, then accepted. The plan was simple but devastating, indirectly leaked news to David that Blackshore was under investigation, that the accounts he trusted were about to close, forcing him to move the money quickly, and while he acted impulsively, we would pull the blanket of security from under him. I prepared a small fake deposit as bait, tempting enough for him to believe in the withdrawal, and Marcus stood behind me like a silent director coordinating a false alert system toward the predator. I knew this could turn a financial game into a public arrest, and a public arrest would melt his reputation. But I wanted more. I wanted him to see his loss, wanted his greed to turn into handcuffs. When he appeared in Key West like a confident decoy, glistening in a white shirt between the sun and the sea, you could imagine he still believed he was untouchable. I let him believe it so he would walk into the trap. I gave him a fake file containing proof that Marissa had betrayed him. I knew his rage would spur him to rush toward her, and in that moment they would raid his villa. The police rushed in a flurry of metal boots and commands. David, who once scorned the law, was again forced to the wooden floor by two pairs of hands that were not mine. I didn't stand in the middle of the scene. I stood on the periphery, feeling every beat of my heart, as a drum signaling a long-scheduled appointment. The news spread quickly. David Hemsworth arrested in Florida, suspect in international money laundering network. Everything seemed to explode in a moment that was both satisfying and irreparable. I returned home, placed the newspaper on the table, looked in the mirror, and saw the woman I once was locked away in a different memory. I raised my wine glass, saw my reflection in the cup, and felt a new kind of solace. I had done it, but not for free. Something had changed inside, not a loss, but something more present, 100% at the core. Marcus sent me a string of files. He had traced every IP, every movement, every payment. David's withdrawal protocol, and between the lines, he inserted a warning. He might still have a way back. I knew that voice. I'd heard it in my own head, too. David could deceive one more time. The call that night came out of nowhere, an old, weary voice, David's voice. "I thought you would stop." I said, "I don't think, I know." He laughed a humorless laugh. "You learned how to play." I didn't say more. The call hung up. My heart didn't pound. Instead, there was the feeling of a door closing and opening into another darker, deeper corridor. I had risen using my own darkness and learned to wear it as armor. I had seen that the Avenger doesn't necessarily need to draw a sword, but can be the one who makes others surrender through fear. The public called it a victory. I called it a new contract with myself. I would use assets, money, law, influence to protect myself like a fortress. Linda asked me, "What will you do with the remaining assets?" I replied plainly, "Keep them. When they have power, they don't dare touch their own blood." And in her eyes, I read something I couldn't avoid. Perhaps I was transforming into the very thing I once hated. I looked out the window, seeing the light rain fall on the street like a silver cloth, and I smiled faintly, not because the suffering vanished, but because I understood that to survive in this world, sometimes you have to become the darkness you once feared. I had set everything up for David to pay publicly for what he sowed, but I wasn't confident that the arrest would be the end. Perhaps it was just Act 1 in a long play. I no longer feared that. I found it engaging. I had learned how to rise, and that rising taught me one thing: when people are cornered, they can destroy the world to live. I didn't choose to destroy the world. I chose to erode the power of the one who had once consumed me. And if doing that required a change of blood, I wouldn't shy away. I put the phone down, turned on the dim lamp in the room, and felt every cell of mine preparing for an even darker opera. Act 4 closed not for rest, but to prepare for the next night, where everything would be pushed to the limit. I never thought darkness had a shape, but that night it stood behind me, breathing in sync with every decision I was about to make. I had gone too far to turn back, and the thin line between the betrayed and the betrayer was now just a thin breath. The new apartment didn't have much noise, only the wall clock repeating its steady tick like a persistent knock on my sanity. On the table, David's files, accounts, emails, and the list of names he used to hide his money were piled up like a maze. I had traced it to the core, where he hid the dirty money he laundered through a ghost consulting firm. Half of it was my money, my life, my trust. Now it would buy my revenge. I didn't need a gun nor a knife. The only weapon I needed was memory, something David always underestimated. I remembered every password he used, every phrase he repeated when he thought I wasn't listening. "No one is smarter than money, Ev." That quote now became the motto for his overthrow. I hired a hacker, a young man who knew me only by the nickname Maeve. I paid double, demanding absolute anonymity. He didn't need to know the target, only to move the numbers according to my command. Within a week, David's 4 offshore accounts were drained, transferred through a network of e-wallets in the name of shell charities I had set up. By the time he realized it, it was too late. On the 8th day, David called. His voice didn't shake, just cold as tempered steel. "What are you doing, Evelyn?" I replied dryly. "Why do you ask? It's not your money." "It's my life's work. Work derived from betraying your wife, sleeping with her assistant, and using my credit card to pay for it." The silence lingered like a suspended knife. "You don't know what you're messing with." "No, David, you don't know who you woke up." I hung up. My breath was shallow but steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt powerful. I started moving like a different person, slow, precise, wasting no steps. I sold the old house, closed all joint accounts, canceled every legal authorization David once had. Everything he thought he controlled was gone. I left him one sole message, a photo printed from his own company's security camera. Me standing in the lobby wearing a black dress, holding a coffee cup, looking straight into the lens. Below the photo, just one line: "Your turn." That evening, I returned to the apartment, opened my laptop. An anonymous email popped up. The subject line had only 2 words: "Checkmate." The content was empty, only an attachment, a video. I opened it, the image of David sitting in a conference room facing me, but not the real me. It was another woman, her face eerily similar to mine. She was signing a contract to sell back the company shares, mine, to him. The signing date was 2 weeks ago. My heart pounded erratically. I zoomed in on the video, recognizing every detail: my necklace, my signature. It was all legally plausible. David had hired someone to impersonate me. No, he had prepared this long before I started my revenge. I didn't take his money. I took my own money. But he had turned it around, framing me as the embezzler. I burst out laughing, a sound that cracked from the back of my throat. I was no longer the deceived woman. I was the one who had stepped onto his chessboard, only to discover that every piece I moved had been anticipated by him. But the game wasn't over. I went to see Lena David's former lawyer, the one who defended him in financial lawsuits. She was surprised to see me. "Evelyn, I thought you disappeared. I need a legal transaction, fast and untraceable." We sat for 3 hours. I told her everything, holding nothing back. When Lena finished listening, her expression changed, no longer pity, but awe. "You know, most women who come to me just want out. You want back in." I replied, my voice level. "I don't want out. I want to win." Lena smiled. "Then we're going to need a new playground." The plan began. I created a fake investment fund using the guise of philanthropists and invited David to invest. I knew he couldn't resist. Money was the only thing that made his heart beat fast. I sent the invitation through an intermediary under the pseudonym Marianne Stone. 3 days later, he replied, "Interested. Let's meet." The meeting took place at a downtown hotel bar. I walked in, cloaked in darkness, a fitted black dress, my hair loose, like the first time he met me 10 years ago. He didn't recognize me immediately. When I sat down, he just sneered, "Marianne Stone." I raised my glass of whiskey. "You can call me Eve." For a moment, I saw his eyes waver. He understood, but couldn't believe it. "What do you really want?" "Fairness." We talked for 2 hours, a duel without blades. I read every breath, every hand gesture. I knew when he was lying, knew what he feared. When I left, I placed a file of the project in his hand. It was actually a trap full of fake documents that could lead to his prosecution for money laundering if he signed, and he would sign because of greed. I drove home, the night wind pouring through the car window. In the mirror, my face was no longer Evelyn's. It was another woman's, cold, quiet, and dangerously beautiful. I thought if darkness had a face, it would look like me right now. 3 days later, David actually signed. The transaction was complete, the money transferred into the fund's account, and just 5 hours later, the FBI raided his office. The news spread fast. I watched on TV, a glass of wine in my hand. The image of David being handcuffed, the flashing lights on his face, and he looked straight into the camera, smiling. A smile I had never seen. No remorse, just calculation. That same evening, I received a small package outside my door. No sender address, only a note. "You finally learned, but who taught you?" Inside the box was a USB stick. I stood for a long time looking at the small USB in my palm. The light reflecting off the cold metal casing gave me the sensation of holding a piece of my own soul. I didn't hesitate. I plugged it into my laptop, the screen flashed, then a single folder appeared, Eve Logs. Inside were dozens of secretly recorded videos, not of David, but of me. Every step I took in the past weeks, the meetings, the money transfers, even the night I met Lena, and the times I sat in the apartment thinking I was alone. A hidden camera had been watching me from the start. One video played automatically. The image of David sitting in a dark room behind him, a wall plastered with photos of me. He spoke, his voice calm, as if reciting an old poem. "Evelyn, you've always been better than I thought. But you forgot whose game this is. I don't need to win. I just need you to play by the rules I set. And you did every step of the way." He paused, taking a sip of wine. "You thought taking my money was revenge. No. That was the test. I needed to know if you were willing to become me. Now I know. Congratulations, Eve. You passed." Um, 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 Yeah, the screen went dark, only the line appearing. "I built you in my image." I sank to the floor, feeling everything in me shatter into 1,000 pieces. He didn't just plan for me to fall into his trap. He wanted me to become him. Every decision I thought was mine, cutting ties, setting traps, counterattacking, it was all on a chessboard he had prearranged. I thought I controlled the game, but it turned out I was just the queen moving in the direction he desired. The phone rang. Unknown number. I knew it was him. "Congratulations, Evelyn. You got them to arrest me. But are you sure they won't come for you after opening the file on that investment fund? It's in your name, remember." I tried to keep my voice steady. "You orchestrated everything." "No, I just opened the door. You walked in yourself." I hung up, throwing the phone against the wall. The dry, shattering sound like the first shot of a new war. I knew what I needed to do: delete the traces, withdraw all the money, disappear before they found me. But something held me back. Was it pride, or just the habit he had molded? I opened the cabinet, took out the box of documents I had kept from the early days, wedding photos, letters David wrote before he turned cold. In one letter, the scrawled handwriting, "If we ever destroy each other, let's make it worth remembering." I laughed, a hoarse, choking sound. He was right. Everything between him and me was never love. It was a war wrapped in the guise of marriage, a long-term project to see who would endure longer, who would be more ruthless. I turned back to the screen, opening the last folder on the USB Eve finale move. It was David again, this time thinner, his eyes sunken, his lips tight. "You think arresting me is the end? No, Evelyn. The end is when you realize you can't live without the feeling of revenge, when you start needing it like oxygen." When you look in the mirror and no longer see yourself, then you win, but you also lose. He bowed his head, laughing softly. "The night has no moonlight, only we illuminate each other with darkness." The screen went dark. I turned off the light, standing in silence. For the first time, I realized that nothing in the room was real. Everything was a reflection from somewhere else. The laptop, the window, the wine glass, even myself. I touched the glass, my reflection blurred. In that moment, I saw David in the mirror, standing behind me, faint as a wisp of smoke. I spun around quickly, but no one was there. Only the scent of the menthol cigarettes he used to smoke lingered. I hated that smell, and now it had become my own. 3 days later, the news reported David committed suicide in the detention center. No confirmation, no evidence. The police said he hanged himself with his shoelaces. I knew he